If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital.
Welcome back. And before we get started today, I wanted to give you a heads up. After next week's episode, we're taking a planned break from the podcast. We'll be back in the fall, and that time's going to let us do some things that we've been wanting to do for a while. Improve the show, grow what we're building here, and come back with something better for you. So thank you, genuinely, for being a part of this community. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss us when we return. Adam Russell and I go back to 2006 at USA Rugby National Team Camp. And in the 20 years since, he's shaped much of how I think about human performance in ways that have touched hundreds of athletes without them ever knowing his name. Today, Adam is AI Division Director at USC's Information Sciences Institute. And before that, he helped stand up both ARPA-H and the US AI Safety Institute. He's been inside the rooms where these decisions get made, and he thinks about AI differently than most people you'll hear from. What I wanted to get at today is the practical reality for someone trying to figure out what AI actually means for their health, their performance, and their life. Adam has a framework that he calls the difference between me AI and we AI. And that distinction alone is worth the conversation. Let's get into it.
The AI thing obviously it's probably a vogue. I wouldn't pay attention to it. It'll disappear. I'm kidding, of course.
Yeah, it's going to pass.
I do work with people who believe that, and people who've been AI for a while who think well, it's just another sort of hype wave. But yeah, so the first question oftentimes we ask is do we need AI for this? The thing I don't want to dissuade people from doing is playing with it. So when someone says well, I don't need AI for this, or you don't need AI for this, people sometimes hear, well, therefore I can afford to ignore AI. And I think that's the wrong conclusion.
Today, I am so happy to welcome my guest, Dr. Adam Russell. He and I go way back, like 2006, I think I met Adam in San Diego at a USA Rugby National Team camp. So Adam, welcome.
Hey, Jez, great to be here. Thanks. Wow, 20 years. But we're still here. So
yes, we are.
On them.
Yeah, exactly. Adam, it's interesting. I was very fortunate to meet some people early in my career, you being very high on that list, who have had just a massive impact in framing my thinking in human performance. And you have had a direct impact on hundreds of my athletes, whether they know it or not. And so incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah. Who do I say? Give me a list and I'll read out their names and apologize accordingly. No, you're obviously too kind, especially since, I have some intimation or some sense of the athletes you've worked with and what you've achieved. So I think you're wrong, but I'll take some credit for that. Sure.
Yeah. It's yours, mate. It's yours to have.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I remember when we first connected and then the conversation we've had over the years. And it is interesting how, during that time, there has been all this sort of technological change.
Yeah.
And yet every time I engage with you, I'm just reminded again and again that the technology changes, but the why of human performance, right? The goals, and then ultimately the big rocks, the real truths have not themselves actually changed, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a really interesting framing for this conversation then. This latest advancement in technology, in AI. I log on LinkedIn and every day there's somebody reaching out, offering me some sort of AI solution to help my business. As we think about this through a healthcare lens, we hear a ton that people think that AI is going to replace healthcare workers. We take radiologists as a big example of this. And also on our personal level to help optimize us and, go through our Apple Health data and cure all our diseases.
Yeah.
What do you think, what exactly is it? What are we being offered here?
Yeah. Okay. Let's start, I think, from, it'll sound like a throwaway phrase, but I actually think it's right, which is if you're not confused, you're not thinking clearly. I mean, and I mean that sincerely in the sense that, one, to help people feel better about the fact that, like, yeah, I can't track this stuff. I don't know what's real, what's hype. I don't know what it can actually do. I don't know what it's going to do. Is my anxiety around like its impact on my job and my kids' like education and their ability to get a job, is that real? Is it going to kill us all? Is it really going to lead to like this post-disease world and utopia? Nobody knows the answers, obviously, but what I'm seeing, unfortunately, in AI in particular, is people have very strongly held opinions in areas where the evidence is pretty equally strong that we actually don't know how good our predictions are. So it's not you. It is genuinely confusing, right? Okay, so let's step back very quickly. One of the assumptions is that human cognition is like computing, right? And therefore computing can do like cognition. Okay, so they start off with this idea of what's called expert systems. Jeremy's an expert. If I can figure out the rules that Jeremy uses to make decisions, I can literally like code that into a computer or a machine, and it will do the same thing. Unsurprisingly, it turns out experts, one, know more than we can ever put into rules. They know more than they know actually how to express as rules.
Yeah.
And those become really fragile and brittle. The next wave we're seeing right now is what's called generative AI. So this is AI that is now essentially coming up with its own rules in some sense. It is beginning to generate knowledge, or at least generate information itself. And we're finding that's exceedingly useful in certain cases. If you played with chatbots, you'll understand how like sometimes that can be really good at aggregating lots of information, and putting together, an answer to a query. Generative AI now is leading AI agents so that you can actually start building small tools that do things in the world rather than just sort of like provide answers. One of the most famous things with generative AI is the large language model. Where I sit right now at Information Sciences Institute, we had two authors on a paper called Attention is All You Need in 2017 that sort of proves this thing called a transformer architecture, which basically allowed a model to know what to pay attention to, which has always historically been the problem, is you give it a problem and it has to go back and sort of revise everything. And that's really hard to do. It's very compute intensive. If it begins to figure out what to attend to, what words tend to stick together, right? What concepts sort of hang together in this very multidimensional embedding spaces, all of a sudden it's much more effective and much more efficient. The biggest challenge is, as you probably know, is generative AI is not deterministic. Unlike expert rules, where if I know how Jeremy makes decisions, I can determine what decision he's going to make if I know all the variables. With generative AI, it's going to be probabilistic. I'll never get quite the same answer twice, which, is probably true of real Jeremy. I don't know if I'll ever get the same answer twice out of you.
Right.
That's okay. But what I will see less of is your tendency to hallucinate.
That's one of my favorite ways that we've tried to make it sound smarter than it is by allowing it to be called hallucinations.
The terminology is so goofy here. Totally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's partly, I mean, again, I think AI is interesting because it reveals more about us oftentimes than the technology. It reveals like we don't know how to talk about this stuff without saying thinking and learning and reasoning and hallucinating. And we use all these anthropomorphic terms because we don't know how else to talk about it. But those are problematic terms in some sense, right? In fact, I would say that, the term optimization, I think, is problematic in some ways because it gets smuggled in with AI too. We can talk about this a little bit more. This is my opportunity for mea culpa. So I started early on, actually, when I knew you first, doing some human performance work for the Department of Defense. And the term we actually were using at that point was human performance optimization. And we chose that term just because we wanted to distinguish it from, like, at that point, just performance enhancement. And the idea that, human performance is this really sort of robust thing. And so the question is, how can you bring interventions to optimize a human's capability to perform in certain areas? I now regret that because of the term optimization suggests you have to have two things for optimization. One, you have to have a very clear outcome you're trying to achieve, right? What's called a reward function. And two, you have to have the ability to stay so focused on that you can essentially strip everything else off that's not important. Optimization is a function of efficiency. In human performance, rarely do we have a single reward function that we can optimize for. but the tools
Yeah.
smuggle this concept in, right? So when you start
Yeah.
using AI and concepts of human performance, if you're not careful, it begins to sort of push you towards thinking about this optimization mentality.
Right. And I think if we look at human performance and we expand that to healthcare, how optimization has evolved over the years has been quite striking to me. When I first started in sport, optimization meant we test you on all of these physical and mental parameters, and we see the ones where you're lacking, the ones where you're really strong, and we work really hard, and we train, and we change our diet, and it was, let's bring all of those things to a high level, right? Based on the task we're trying to achieve. But it's sort of evolved into these chasing numbers. Like, can we make sure that your vitamin D is in what we think is an optimum level? So it became supplements on micronutrients, and then red light therapy beds. And it's evolved into these really esoteric things that we're optimizing, but we might be super weak. Right. So, and we're ignoring these things because they're not fancy, right? They're the foundational elements of performance, but we spend a lot of time up here worrying about stuff that is in effect going to have absolutely no impact on your actual outputs. And it as I take that from performance into longevity, that's what longevity has become. It is an industry that we can sell you things at a high profit margin that you won't really be able to tell me yes or no, this helped me live longer. I think I feel better. I just got this NAD infusion, as opposed to, I got a 50% increase in my squat, and that being probably the largest predictor of your brain function 20 years from now.
Yeah. So what you're talking about there, I think, is interesting. So with AI, they refer to neurons in a very sort of like very loose analogy, right? They're not actually like neurons. And part of the reason that's important is because in AI, the neuron that's working inside of a model does very specific thing, right? It's just essentially calculating the weight of a number that collectively add up to an outcome. In biology, you rarely see optimization, right? You rarely see. There are people who argue like, well, the eye was optimized, but what they mean by optimization in biology generally is like coming up with the best solution you have at the moment, given the constraints you're facing. But a biological system that's highly optimized is also deeply fragile, right? When the when the ecology changes, when the environment shifts, when there's new competitors, if you have optimized for a particular outcome, you're toast because you no longer have the robustness that's really important to be able to handle new challenges. And so I think in the performance world, I can't think of a sport, maybe like 100-meter track. How many sports can you truly optimize for? Because the team you're playing one week to another will have different strengths, and you can't optimize for speed or strength. You can't optimize for a particular play. And so you can certainly prioritize certain things. But to your point, the squat strength, you're not optimizing for the squat. You're actually creating robustness because there's this additional capability, this agility, this ability to respond to demands that you can't see coming. Right. But the reality is, like, if you safely improve the strength of your squat, you will be able to walk downstairs faster. Right. Or more safely. You'll have better balance. You'll have better cognitive performance. You'll have all these benefits that you actually don't know whether you'll need those benefits or not in the future because you don't know what environment you're going to face. And so that's a concern about optimization is it's actually really fragile. And we saw this even with like supply chains and COVID. Right. We had optimized the supply chains to the point that when something changed, when suddenly we couldn't all go out of the house, like, boom, it just broke. There was no robustness or resilience to these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting way to think about like AI as it comes into this field is what are we using it for? You used a term when we previously spoke, the jagged frontier.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's going to be really good at some things and it's going to be super, super helpful. And then it's going to be sort of crappy at other things, but we don't really know what they are yet. Yeah,
no, that's right. This is where, there's an entire industry, important industry, building evaluations and benchmarks, trying to figure out like, well, AI can now, compete at the level of an international math Olympian, but it still can't tell like time on an analog clock. And we sort of talk about that. And there are reasons, and most of this stuff is being addressed, but I think to your point, I think a lot of people, there's a tendency to look at AI as just this sort of answer machine. And if that's all you're looking for, first, I don't think you're getting the most out of AI. But secondly, you'll be sorely disappointed at some point, because you will find it's very good at answering the questions that you have. They may not be the right questions, right? It will be very good at helping you to optimize for something without asking the question, is this the right thing to optimize for? Should I be optimizing? Should I be building more robustness? Now, I think that's partly because we tend to look at AI as automation. Automate something I'm doing. To automate, help me do something better, faster, more optimal. If we look at it instead as a sort of almost a thinking partner.
Yeah.
And again, I hate the anthropomorphism, but let's go with it. As a thinking partner, if I were if I had access to you all the time, Jeremy, one of the conversations we'd be having is like, what am I really trying to do? Am I really trying to optimize the right things? Why aren't we working with AI to do that? Rather than AI make me go faster on a road that I might be on the wrong road, using AI to help me like challenge my own assumptions, right? To help me think outside of my box, push my boundaries, and get me to ask kind of deeper questions in some sense. I think AI can do that, but it will only do that if it's working with a human that's getting it to do that. I think, if you stop thinking about it necessarily as automation, more as augmentation, like how can it help me become a better friend, right? In some sense.
Right.
Or how can I help me like develop a better bedside manner as a doctor? Or how can it help me recognize my own cognitive biases? I think that's really interesting, because you've gone from what I call me AI to we AI. Let me unpack that. By me AI, I mean, I'm using AI essentially as a tool to optimize like my current processes and tasks. Right. And it's very good at that, within to a certain degree. But that assumes that I have the right function. Am I doing the right thing, right? That I actually care about. Here, let me give, and then there's the we AI is where you're actually drawing on more collective intelligence, where you're actually using AI to expand your cognitive aperture, not just find more information for you, but actually help you think using resources that were previously impossible. And one example is I use what I call AI advisory boards. I will build an advisory board of AI personas that can challenge me, help me make decisions, help me think through stuff. And now I don't take any of this as gospel, but what's fascinating is watching, a multiple sets of AIs arguing over something. And I can watch that argument, and it's actually, I think it's raising some really important issues that I had not considered before.
Yeah. I think that skepticism is important. How we engage with AI without outsourcing our judgment is a really important piece. How often do you see a very confident answer presented, and you challenge it with a question around that, or I don't think so, I think maybe it's this, and oh, you're right.
Yeah. Oh, you're a genius.
Actually, it's this, right? And it's like, wow, if I had presented that, or if I had just gone with that and taken it as gospel, we can end up in trouble. I heard about a firm who had been using it for reporting, in the financial sector, and they found out the last 6 months of reports had been entirely hallucinations.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's fun. Just leaning on it for the thing, right?
So this does actually, there's another constant topic in AI now, which is it's pushing the essentially the friction from execution to verification. So it's going to be really easy to produce, polished reports, packets of information. The hard part now will be verifying. Like, is that actually right? Is it accurate? Is it robust? Does it speak to what you need? So so it's just pushing the pain in some sense.
Right.
But, if you're in that workflow and that pain is being pushed on you, like I understand why people are getting frustrated with this.
Yeah.
It's supposed to make my job easier. If you're a two-person startup, maybe it is. But if you're in a long, chain of work in a complicated organization, and now suddenly like you're getting handed work slop, I can see why people get frustrated. Now, one thing about this is interesting to me. We talked earlier about we AI and me AI. The me AI stuff, I think is interesting because it says more about the incentives of our systems than the technology itself. And here's what I mean is we're seeing indications that in science, right? So I work in a university. It is shown increasingly with confidence that AI is radically accelerating people's abilities to publish, to get articles out, and to advance their own careers. even while it's beginning to narrow the collective space of exploration that we have in science. So it's reducing our collective exploration, right? The parts of the world that we, will actually pay attention to, while it's improving my own sort of individual performance. Right. Highlighting that the incentives in science, science is mostly about finding truth. The incentives, however, tell me that AI is most effective. It helps you get published, and produce more volume of work, not actually getting closer to truth in some sense. And so it highlights these things like, we think the system is set up to do this, but as people use AI, you begin to realize actually it rewards this. And the same thing we're seeing with like work slop is I'm being rewarded for just getting this work off my table, not for producing good work in some sense.
Right.
And now, so getting to healthcare, it's going to be really interesting to see, like, I consider it almost like a radioactive tracer. If you ever had a PET scan where, they put the stuff in you and it goes to the hotspot and tells you like, where's the thing you need to pay attention to. As we put AI into healthcare, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to be this like radioactive tracer that will highlight where those misaligned incentives might actually be. Things like the idea of radiologists, right? That like Jeffrey Hinton famously in 2016 said, don't go into radiology. There'll be no jobs there because AI is so good at spotting. Yeah. Essentially, working with X-rays and figuring out and diagnosing what's and seeing things that doctors can't see, which we know is true, by the way. Like that, it does that.
Yes.
But now you have the verification challenge, and now you have the open question, like, what are we actually trying to do in radiology? And the answer is not just like, spot the bad thing in the X-ray. It's actually to try to heal people, right? That's what you're trying to do. And so there's a lot more to that than just, find the bad thing on the X-ray.
Right. And now deliver the news, right? You're dealing with a human.
Deliver the news, right? And this is where, and now unfortunately you have a situation where the other incentives come into play, which is like, well, there are companies who are incentivized not to cover that from an insurance perspective. Right? They're incentivized to say no. And we know this is happening, that there are algorithms that by default just say no because it's effortless, and decline insurance claims. Yeah. And if you don't know better, like you're at a real disadvantage.
Well, and I think as we start digging into healthcare now, as it pertains to AI, the augmentation piece, I think, is the most critical part here, because my world was a microcosm of healthcare, right? And we got very fast turnaround of results, right? If an entire career, which is basically a pro athlete's life, is 10 years, it's like a mouse study. Right?
Yeah, that's
You've got to perform every 3 days. And so we try something, it either works or it doesn't. The next day we can iterate very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Largely, it wasn't about automation. It wasn't about really if this, then this. It was about the we AI concept of how do we change the behavior of an organization as an entity, right? So the organization is not behaving correctly. Mm-hmm. And then how do we zoom into how do we create behavior change at the individual level to produce the outcomes that we need? Yep. So we could monitor and collect data on everything. We could afford the technology. We could put monitors on guys. We were allowed to do all that. But if it didn't change a behavior, why were we doing it? And so that's where I think we've got to center this conversation. So at the we AI level, the silos that exist in sport and in healthcare, right? Yeah. There was your medical, your athletic training, there was your strength and conditioning, there was your data people, your front office, your coaches, and they rarely actually talk to one another, even though you'd think they're in the same building and the incentives are aligned that way. Mm-hmm. But information became currency. So whether you were the head strength coach or the head athletic trainer, if you had the information, people had to come to you. Because you were each your own boss, if there was a disagreement, there was nobody to mediate. And so we start taking our stance. This guy's an idiot. This guy's an idiot, right? All of these dynamics set up that were completely counter to what we thought the goal was, which was the athlete. Yeah. Right? Improve the athlete, keep the athlete healthy. But now we're competing with our individual motivations.
Yeah, your own incentives there in that regard. Yeah, no, that's true. And I, so 2 quick comments on that, because I do think I do think you put your finger on something super important. Which again, if you just take an organization with its existing incentives and you just inject me AI, I think you're going to end up with chaos. I think you're going to end up with people like radically accelerating their own performance, their own work, their own tasks, and it could actually begin to degrade organizational effectiveness. Not just like not improve it, but it could actually begin to degrade it. We'll see, but so I'm worried about that. So I do think like you're right. The human's going to human. When I helped stand up early on, a while ago, I helped stand up ARPA-H, which is the sorry, if you know DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. ARPA-H was the DARPA for health, and the goal of an ARPA is to do what they call high risk, high payoff research. So you're taking big swings on things like, in DARPA's case, the internet. Well, what happens if you connect computers everywhere? What could possibly go wrong? Or alternatively, like what's great about that? And there's pros and cons to the internet as we're discovering, but also like autonomous vehicles, GPS. The question is, what can ARPA-H do in the healthcare space along these lines? Like, what are the big bets it can take to produce new solutions? That's the what. The why, or the why of the organization. Again, is this mission to do high risk, high payoff research. And then my job was to sort of set up the how. Like, how are we going to design this organization to do this, especially in the shadow of, like a place like NIH. Now, much love for NIH. One of the things I had to do was say, like, look, ARPA-H is not a negative comment on NIH. It is an additional tool, a different mechanism of how to do this. But it's a very different culture, right? The culture is you're term limited. You have to move fast because you're term limited. You have large budgets. You have to make decisions quickly on like what are big bets. If they're not working, you need to shut those down and move the funding around. A very, very different agile model than sort of standard, a lot of NIH grants. So there was a book that had come out called Loon Shots by a guy named Safi Bakal, who had done some study on, ARPA organizations and so what made them. What was the secret sauce? By the way, fascinating when you've actually been in a DARPA and you talk to people who write about DARPA who've never been there, how they're sort of right sometimes, but his argument in the book is like, there are no office politics at DARPA because they're so focused on the missions. Like, okay.
Same goes for pro sports organizations.
Right? Oh, you guys are all so focused on the game. Like nobody like arm wrestles.
Pure high performance.
No turf wars there. Yes. Okay.
No.
But so I reached out to him and I said, hey, I'm really interested in better understanding how can you set up an organization so that we can begin to anticipate these misaligned incentives, right? That we can begin to draw this the org chart that says, hey, at some point, Jeremy and Adam are going to be incentivized not to work together because their own tasks, right? And his answer was like, well, that's why they pay me. I was like, all right, well, fair enough. But I think we can do better. And I think it's going to be super important to do that because AI is going to just sort of like, AI is an amplifier in some sense. It takes what we care about, it takes what we do and just sort of amplifies that. And so if our incentives are poorly aligned, AI is not going to make that better. AI is going to amplify that. So we need to do some hard thinking at a human level, at organizational design perspective. And then to your point, what are you trying to do? Right? What as we say, WRLL, what does right look like? And if you don't have that clearly in mind, you're gonna be in chaos because there's a reason why I took a job to help stand up the AI Safety Institute. I like to start things in the government because you have all the stress and like none of the risk of being a tech billionaire. Like you don't have to worry about getting rich. But the position I had was called Chief Vision Officer, which sounds sort of weird, but the whole point was like, look, if we're going to get into space, we need to have a vision of what does right look like. Why are we building these evaluations? Why are we building these benchmarks? Why are we testing these models? What does right look like? And right does not look like shutting everything down. Right also probably doesn't look like just letting it go. Right. There's some vision that I think is important for organizations, teams, probably even countries to have that helps guide these things, especially as I think we have to move from expert mentalities to explorer mentalities. And what I mean by that is experts tend towards optimization. And this is what you're highlighting. Like if you're an expert in your area, your silo, like you are optimizing for that particular function, for your particular role, your control of resources, et cetera. Explorers are ones who sort of acknowledge, like, I don't know. Like, I actually don't know how this is going to play out. This technology is going to change how I do things because it's a jagged frontier. We don't know where it's good or where it's bad. So we have to become explorers again. And explorers don't use maps. They use compasses. Right. And that what right looks like is the compass because you don't know how you're going to get there. There's no map here. And I think that's a challenge to the expert mindset Experts don't like not knowing stuff,
Right.
in my experience.
But even as we talk incentives around that, experts aren't incentivized to say, I don't know.
100%.
Right. If you look at pro sport, like you got to have an answer. Right. Or you feel like you do, because people can get fired for basically nothing. And so there's an existential threat to not knowing. Right. Well, you're supposed to be the expert. You're supposed to be this. And so that was something that when I would go in and build high performance departments and strip away the silos, first thing was, what are we optimizing for?
Yeah, questions, right? The first you had are questions, not answers.
Exactly. And everybody's just working on this spectrum of human performance. It's not medical, like it's some separate thing within the human body that then there is a distinct medical exercise versus a distinct strength and conditioning exercise. It's just the human body responding to stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was down to our culture. What are we optimizing for? Where is the athlete in this? What are the people to the left and right at you good at? What are you good at? And when are they better at it than you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then creating our culture, not my rules, but like, what does our system look like?
Yeah.
Then feeding into that, then what do we need technology for?
Yeah.
Because again, we could afford everything.
Yeah.
My job was what do we not buy?
Yeah.
Right. We yes, that's great. I love that we can measure it. We're not going to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's off the table. So what are the functions we're going to be doing that we can use technology to measure that is going to impact a behavior in the coach, the athlete, or the staff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where we filled in technology.
Yeah. And that's, and to your point, you did use the word optimize, which I get, cause you can't get away from it nowadays, but, the term I'm using now is you need to stop-timize. You need to and by that, I mean, you deliberately have to ask, are we optimizing for something here? And it's like, first of all, if that's true, you better be the right thing. But secondly, do you have to optimize? Like, can you build in a little bit more resilience, robustness?
Yeah.
That, and things that might look like redundancy in some case, or that might seem like frivolous in some sense, but you don't know what's going to be useful. Again, if you look at some of the best military units, like they will have specialties, but specialties that like overlap because they were aware.
Yes, exactly.
At some point, you might not have your medics, so you need somebody who knows how to stop bleeding, right? You just don't know what's coming. So I think if you can think about like, how do we stop-timize and how do we actually build systems so that we are improving what I call our learning quotient. So when Dr. Bettle learns something about an athlete or learns something about a technique, how does that learning get conveyed across the organization as fast and as effectively as possible?
Right.
And the death of that is silos, as you said. Information is like kind of your currency. The we AI is going to help, I think, if an organization is deliberate about stop-timization, they will build AI that actually addresses that problem. Which is, I'm engaging with an athlete. I need to know what Jeremy thinks about this. I need to know what are we actually trying to achieve. I need to all these things that historically have either been disincentivized or really hard to do because I don't have time to talk to Jeremy all the time. Right. I think there's we AI that might actually help us now improve the collective intelligence so that I'm making decisions that are not just better, but are more aligned with like, what does right look like?
Yeah. So let's shift then to the listener, like to the me AI, right? Mm-hmm. I'm listening to this. I am trying to understand how I can implement AI for my healthcare. And as I've moved from sport, where I think it's becoming important, by the way, for the athlete to own their data and understand it, because they move between organizations, right? There's no loyalty anymore. You're going to be with 10 teams in 10 years. But in a system that is siloed, in the healthcare system, as I've come out of sport, there isn't a performance director. Right? There isn't somebody that each individual has watching everything that's going on in their health journey. So how can an individual in this system utilize AI for their own healthcare?
So, I mean, AI again is sort of everywhere in healthcare right now. So there are, there's currently war among companies trying to be the the transcription features when you go to your doctor. That is phenomenal. Like if I don't have to spend my time writing notes, I can talk to you. That's incredible. It's never been easier to do research in some sense. In my experience, especially in areas like health and human performance or wellness, going to a slightly more serious academic sort of fine-tuned model can sometimes get you like more substantive answers in a still a fairly intelligible way, right? You don't have to have a PhD to carve through it. You just need to play with this stuff. You need to be an explorer and don't be intimidated. What can I do now to sort of just begin to play with this sort of thing? So looking at, and by the way, I'm not a big LinkedIn poster, but my next couple of posts are going to be essentially about this. Is like early resources for, I've got a series called My Mom Has Questions About AI. And one of the questions I get a lot, keynotes, is like, where do I start? And so I figured, I'm just going to send out a couple posts on like, these are easy places to start to up your sort of LQ, right? Your learning quotient.
Right.
But a starter drug in this area is like NotebookLM. I don't know if you've used that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Google. I mean, that is an example where you can put really fairly complicated like PDFs or scientific studies or combinations thereof into NotebookLM, ask it to say like, okay, give me a podcast designed for like a 10th grader. And it comes back with like a 20-minute podcast that really sort of gets the gist, right?
Yeah.
And so now you have access to information that, frankly, in many cases, professionally, the experts have tried to keep you out of by using jargon and language that's like impenetrable. Okay, that's useful. Now, you do not encode that information as deeply as you would if you actually, had gone to school for 6 years and read the article. I'm not claiming that. But do you need to? Probably not. I think NotebookLM has actually been really useful as well for tracking over time, your own sort of experiences. If you keep a journal, or some of your data, if you're comfortable putting some of that up, it can also help you like see the trends and patterns and understand it in a user-friendly way. I would be wary also of overcommitting to a specific AI system at this point, because they're at war right now. You have two different things. You have the large AI providers who are trying to get your data. Not necessarily, for evil purposes, but like that data is important for them to train their models, and it's also important for them to make it more relevant to you. Mm-hmm. Then you have sort of slightly lower ecosystem of tools that are built on those models that are essentially trying to do the same thing, but trying to improve the user interface. I think there are still problems to be solved, and hopefully people are tackling this stuff for what you were talking about is personal use of AI.
Yeah.
One of which is like, why do I have to give you my data? Your models should be smart enough that like, if I have my data locally and those models engage with it, they should still be very useful to me. Yeah. And I think that's called AI at the edge. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see more around things like federated learning. This is a concept where your data are yours, my data are mine, but the model is able to sort of train. We train local models that are then ensembled into a large model.
Yeah.
So I don't have to see your data, but I can still benefit from the insight that a model gets from yours.
And that's I think important. Like if we looked at injuries in sport, and as we try and understand the factors that go into an injury, a soccer club might have 2 ACL injuries in 5 years. Really hard to create any sort of pattern recognition in that. But if the entire league's data goes up into this sort of model, then now we increase a number of instances.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And especially in healthcare, again, where I work, there's some people who are really smart about trying to figure this out. So I'm excited about that. But in addition to being an explorer, I start thinking about it from this AI perspective. How can you use AI to provide you with a wise crowd rather than like, an idiot savant? What I mean is you want more opinions, not fewer ones when it comes to these things. There's a reason why surgeons will oftentimes get together and present cases, and they'll have lots of people offer opinions. And that seems like that might be like sort of a waste of time in the era of AI, but I think actually that's even more important now because AI can have this optimizing effect. You have, one voice or one notionally very confident voice. If you listen to that, I think you're in the optimization basket.
Yeah.
If you're looking for more robustness, you want more opinions, you want more insights to help challenge your thinking.
Yeah.
But that you have to be deliberate about that.
You had said you created an advisory board, right? Out of your agents, like where you built in that critical thinking, that challenging sort of discussion.
Yeah, no, that's right. Again, if anybody's interested, they can reach out to me wherever, and I'm happy to talk further about this. Because I really think that's the power is we have access to wise crowds now. And And you can ask AI to help you do this, by the way. So people think like, where do I even start? I mean, just go to AI and say like, hey, I want an advisory board. I want to make sure I'm not, over fixated or over anchored on a particular approach. And it can usually be pretty good at helping you do that. To be honest, but again, this is where it's going to be to be deliberate on these lines.
And that's I think the pattern recognition piece is really important. As we look at our different medical specialties, and we've got our medical specialties and a bunch of silos there, but then we've also got our trainer and our dietitian, and we've got all of these different aspects, and none of them ever speak to one another.
Yeah.
What I've found, with my clients as I've come out into this real world, is I am basically acting as the personal performance director, where I can bring that stuff in, and we're going through very detailed assessments. I've found it to be very helpful in my workflow in synthesizing multiple data streams and looking for those patterns and connections. So where might this MRI report link into something I can do with nutrition, right? And so I think it is helpful in managing that. If you had your advisory board,
that's what it's made to do. I mean, in some sense, if it's a translator, right? So it's an amplifier of human capability sometimes, but it also translates really well. I mean, it was trained on essentially language, right? A lot of these lines. And so, if you think of disciplines as speaking different languages, like it can be very good at coming up with like, well, what they're really saying is this, or coming up with the sort of meta language in some sense. But this is also where like, the value of a wise crowd is it red teams this. So you can ask it to challenge you and say, where might this be wrong? Or what am I missing? In fact, one of the things I encourage people to do is try to break AI. Try to get it, ask it a question, or try to come up with for it to do something that it can't do. One, because that gives you this notion of the jagged frontier. Like, are you on the jagged frontier? Are you outside of its capabilities by asking it to do X? But the other thing about it is, you begin to realize like you can really challenge this thing to push back on you and help knock you out of your comfort zone in some sense. And I think that's really powerful, is to say, I have deep confidence in this conclusion. Tell me the 5 ways I might be wrong. And not saying it's right, but saying like, those are 5 things you probably haven't thought about. Humans are notoriously bad at challenging their own biases. We just have to acknowledge that. Okay. It's a bug, not a feature, but with AI, we can use this to challenge that and turn it into a feature, right? that we acknowledge these blind spots and we're more open to it. Again, does that sound like an expert, or does that sound like an explorer, right? Explorer wants to know, am I lost or not? The expert just charges ahead.
Right. And I think it's important to recognize that AI might also not be that expert.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like you said, like the idiot savant, like I have several clients and athletes in the past who will basically input their symptoms and like, what's wrong with me? And they will come back to me with that report. Like, okay, here's what it said we should do about this. And like, well, that's not necessarily a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, again, this is where it's like, it's not an answer machine. It's a thinking partner. And like, you would never, well, some people would, but like the drunk guy at the end of the bar, like you wouldn't just defer to that person, right? About this stuff. In fact, frankly, as a notional expert myself, I'm not asking people to like surrender cognitively to me when I make I make a decision or suggest something, right? I'm trying to provide value, knowing that value is likely will still have to be changed in some sense. Why would we treat AI that way? Well, partly because it has been optimized. There's that word again, optimized to play to exactly that. And part of the reason they do this is because they're trained through what's called reinforcement learning of human feedback. It's making these predictions, presenting it to a panel of a couple of humans, and the humans are saying like, well, I like that answer better than that answer. And this will surprise you. It turns out humans love being agreed with. It turns out humans love being told they're geniuses, right? We do not like being challenged. And so as a result, it's optimized to sound super confident. In many cases, it does actually have access to information we don't, but also, highly like, the term was sycophancy, but really now it's more like highly agreeable.
Yeah.
If you knew someone who were really super smart, but was like that all the time, like you would never just depend on their judgment. But because of the way these things are designed, it's hard to do. So that's the other thing is I would really encourage, and part of the LinkedIn post I'll have is, for the skeptics as well, you need to make sure you have in your AI diet, your LQ diet, some people who are pointing out what's wrong with this stuff. Not because you should dismiss it, but because that's important to have in your bandwidth. So yes, so I think that's going to be really important. Then I guess the other thing I would encourage people to do individually is to think hard about how they can use AI to connect them to another human being. So don't just be caught up in it's me and the AI answer this question. But to your point, it's kind of annoying, I think, maybe when they bring an AI report and say, here's the answer. But that'd be very different if they said, hey, I've been working with AI and here's what we're thinking. What do you think? Right? Yeah. That's a conversation. Now you've created connection. And dare I say, you're building we AI rather than just like fixating on this me AI.
Right. We got to wrap here, but I think probably the most pressing question that people will have is, how do I get it to stop putting M dashes in all the reports?
Tell it. Tell it.
Not. You tell it, it just keeps doing it. We have a lot of it's me and Claude over this. Like it's
yeah, I guess that's it. This is also like, I think in some ways maybe they've done this as a safety feature because it is such a tell now that when you have something produced in AI, you have to go through it and get rid of the M dashes to make it sound.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to come up with like the 2 or 3 spelling errors. That's right. Yeah. To show it was human production.
Yeah,
that's a great question. I think anything else that we didn't cover in particular? I realize sometimes these recommendations don't seem terribly practical, but I think that's partly because one, it's more important to me to inculcate this mindset. So I use the term AI after next. There's a lot of debate, as you know, around things like AGI. It's called artificial general intelligence. The idea that you're going to produce an AI that's as sort of intelligent and can do all economically valuable work that humans can do. There's things like ASI, artificial superintelligence. I don't know how useful those are for most people as terms. What I do think is useful though is this notion of AI after next, which means unfortunately, and I sort of wish this weren't true, but unfortunately, just when you think you've got to handle an AI, it's going to take a step function. It'll change. The tools will get better. They'll show up somewhere else. So that's why I think this Explore mindset is going to be super important for AI after next, meaning we have to be ready. We're going to be the space where this stuff is going to be coming. Now, there's a tendency to see this and feel disempowered. And I think, again, this is why I'm sympathetic to people, they're graduates or students who are booing speakers now when they mention AI. I don't know if you saw that Eric Schmidt gave a talk and they're booing them. There's lots of reasons, I'm sure, why that's the case. But one of it is this narrative of disempowerment of like, well, guess what? There's nothing you can do about it. AI is coming. Buckle up, buttercup. Yeah. And first of all, that's not true. Although it is, it seems that way and it is deeply overwhelming in some sense, even for people who understand the technology. But I think I just go back to, in the near term, this notion of AI as an amplifier. People say like, well, I want AI to turn out well. The best, most actual piece of that I think I can offer is, then let's be good humans. Let's spend a lot of time really focusing on how to build and become good humans, because that AI is going to amplify that. And it sounds cheesy. The best thing you can do, I mean, as you are, Jeremy, is be the best human you can be, because then my sense is the AI you use will reflect that and amplify that. Right. And that's good for us, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it'll help when AI does take over if we've been nice to it.
I know some people seriously who are writing like very positive science fiction articles to put on the internet in the hopes that like the machines will read this and think like, oh, there's a way we don't have to kill all humans.
Just a simple thank you, like.
That's true. Hey, that's called robustness, man. You don't know what you're going to be facing. Yeah.
Hedging, right? We're hedging our bets.
100% hedging. But yeah, there's so much else we could cover here, but I'm glad you're covering this topic. And I hope, the references I'll cite will be useful. Because we're all in this together, really. We sometimes we forget that, but we're making this up as we go along.
And where can people find you and reach out? You mentioned LinkedIn, and is there anywhere else they can find you?
That's hard enough for me. I just want to, I'm not trying to optimize for anything. So I'm on LinkedIn, Adam Russell, currently at University of Southern California. So they can find me there. Woe unto them, but I will be posting some stuff that I hope is helpful.
Great.
Because that's really what I want to do. I just want to help.
Amazing. Well, Adam, thank you again so much for your time today. This has been a blast.
Hey, man, I'm a big fan. Keep doing what you're doing. Build good humans.
That's the goal. Thanks, mate.
Man. Talk to you.
Well, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed Adam's use of particularly the advisory boards. I think that could be something really practical that I'll personally take away and build into both work and personal life. Here are the 3 things I want you to take away from today. First, build an explorer mindset. This technology is going to keep changing, and the people who try to stay expert in it are going to keep getting caught flat-footed. The compass matters more than the map right now. Second, be a good human. That sounds simple, but Adam meant it seriously. AI amplifies who you already are. If you want AI to work well for you and the people around you, the investment starts with you, not the tool. Third, use AI to create connection, not replace it. Bringing an AI report to your doctor and saying, here's the answer, is very different from bringing it and saying, here's what I've been thinking about. One shuts down the conversation, creates defensiveness. The other opens it up. That is the version of this technology that's worth building towards. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave a rating or a review. It makes a real difference in helping us reach more people who could benefit from these conversations. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vitality Collective Performance, where we share additional insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. The information shared in this episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your training, recovery, or health practices. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.